Hey, welcome to our New York Giants Preservation Society meeting for today, March 9th, 2024, with Mark Sternman. Mark will be discussing Willie Mays and the managers that Mays played for for the Giants in New York and San Francisco, and I assume with the Mets as well. This is a continuation of our the month of May's celebration of Willie's birthday. Next week, we'll have Joe Pisansky. Joe has written two relatively new books, Baseball 100 and Why We Love Baseball. And he will mostly talk about Willie Mays and those two books. As you all know, Willie celebrated his 93rd birthday on Monday. We were in John Shea's article the other day. He gave us a salute for especially all the people who wished him a happy birthday on our special thing. It was in there, so that was really nice of John. There aren't many women in here tonight, if any, except for Joanne at this point. But please wish all of your loved ones a happy Mother's Day on Sunday. Without any further ado, I'm going to turn the program over to Mark. Mark contributed again to the Willie Mays 5 tool book that Saber made last year, put out last year. It is available if you're a Saber member to download, or you can buy it on Amazon. So let's all welcome Mark Sternman to the New York Giants Preservation Society. Mark, the floor is yours. Take it away.
All right, so I need to, you need to share the screen so I can get up to the PowerPoint?
I will give it to you, sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. All yours.
All right. Okay. Gary, thanks very much for that introduction. I appreciate everybody coming out tonight. I'm thrilled and honored to be here. I've got to admit, I'm the son of a Brooklyn Dodgers fan, and I'm a New York Yankees fan, but I was really primarily a Montreal Expos fan growing up. So I know the pain that New York Giants fans felt when their team moved to San Francisco. At least you guys got to keep the name of your team, and they didn't go to another country. I should talk about what this presentation is and what it isn't. It's Willie Mays and his managers. It's not the managers of Willie Mays. So I'm really going to talk about Mays's relationship to his managers as opposed to the careers of the managers themselves, though I'll delve into that a little bit. And with someone who had as great a career as Mays, it's always fun to look back. I'm sure all of you, like me, enjoy looking at old box scores. So I looked at 70 years ago today, May 9, 1954. 1954 is, I'm sure most, if not all of you know, was the 1 year Willie Mays was a World Series champion. The Giants beat the Pirates in Pittsburgh 5-1. Mays was 1 for 4 with 2 RBIs. There are going to be a lot of quotations on the PowerPoint. I will not read the quotations. My email address will be at the end. So anyone who wants the PowerPoint, I'm happy to send it to you. The piece that Gary referenced, which is available free online at the Saber site, in addition in the book, has all the quotations and sources for the quotations. About 2/3 of the presentation will be from the piece, which I wrote about 2 years ago, and the last third will be new stuff. So let's get into it. Just a bit more about myself and one more box score. I was born on September 27, 1968. I only bring that up because today, for the first time this afternoon, I looked up the Giants game that day, and it was quite a game. The Giants beat the Reds 3-2 in 15 innings. Mays went 4 for 7 and hit the game-winning home run in the 15th inning off Ted Abernathy. Game was in Cincinnati, so it wasn't a walk-off. Not that walk-offs were, that term was used in 1968, but pretty cool how you can pick random days and with Mays more than most, get great games. I'm a member of Saber. I appreciate Gary plugging Saber earlier. I've done a lot of baseball writing, most of which you can find linked on my author page on the Saber site. The folks I mentioned in the bios and the game stories are ones that are involving the Giants. The two players really just had cups of coffee with the Giants. Jimmy Johnston had a long career, mostly with the Brooklyn Dodgers. Fred Tenney, who actually coached at Tufts University down the street from where I am now in Somerville and lived in Massachusetts, played a little longer, played 2 years with the Giants. And in 1908, an infamous year in Giants history, he started every game but one at first base for the Giants. Unfortunately, the game he didn't start, a rookie by the name of Fred Merkle replaced him, and that was the Merkle-Boner game, which cost the Giants the 1908 National League pennant eventually when they lost the playoff, and then the Cubs went on to win the World Series. All right, let's get into Mays's managers. Piper Davis was his first manager in the Negro Leagues. Now the 1948 Birmingham Black Barons are considered a major league team. Piper was a great player. He filled Mays with a lot of confidence. And I should say that the themes I'm going to carry throughout the talk, I'm going to talk about leadership. I'm going to talk about confidence building and star treatment. I'm going to talk about racism. And the big takeaway from my research, which I assume someone has reported before, but I haven't seen it, is the incredible run of rookie, inexperienced managers that Mays had for most of his career managing the Giants. So Davis, not surprising for the context of the times in which Mays played, was the only black man under whom Mays played for. Mays had a really good relationship with Piper, a bit maybe of a father-son relationship. And Piper, I think, knew when to build him up and knew when to give him a little kick and to get going. Mays also played in Birmingham in 1949. That is not considered a major league, so a professional league. That's not in the presentation. Mays went up after signing with the Giants organization in 1950 to Trenton. His manager at the time was very praiseworthy of Mays. Not that Mays's talents should have been at really any point in his career particularly difficult to appreciate. Interestingly, he said, he's pictured here with Duke Snider, said he wasn't as much of a power hitter as Snider was, which may have been true in 1950. But over the course of his career, Mays not only hit a lot more homers, but homered more frequently than Snider did. Mays's final minor league manager was Tommy Heath, pictured here. Heath was a former catcher for the St. Louis Browns, so thus the picture with the Browns. Mays hit 477 in Minneapolis, but still didn't want to go up to the Giants. It's funny to think today a player that talented would probably have his agent screaming at the front office why he wouldn't go up to the league. Mays wanted to stay in Minneapolis. He really enjoyed Minneapolis. Being from the South, perhaps he didn't want to go to a bigger city in New York. Obviously, he had a long love affair with New York City, so things ended up working out. And now on to the majors. The baseball cards, I'm a big baseball card fan, and I tried to pick cards that with Mays and his managers from the years that were associated with Mays playing on the team. I think the Mays-DeRocher relationship is the best well-known one. How Mays got off to a slow start with the Giants, but DeRocher never lost faith in him. Gave him some practical advice in addition to building up his confidence. And there was even some complaining by other Giants, including Mays' future Hall of Fame outfielder Monty Irvin, that Mays got special treatment from DeRocher. One could certainly see why DeRocher gave a special player special treatment, at least in retrospect, not that Irvin was something to sneeze at. Mays then went on, after DeRocher left, Bill Rigney took over and was the transition between the New York Giants and the San Francisco Giants. And as I alluded to earlier, I was shocked, surprised, didn't know that Rigney was the first of 6 rookie managers in a row, managers who had no major league experience, who the Giants brought in to manage Mays and the Giants for whatever reason. I guess I could see why you might do that once in a while, why you would go for 6 in a row when for the most part, the team, in my judgment, given how talented they were, underachieved is a little bit mysterious to me. I like the master and mentor card on the one hand and not on the other. It's a bit, the language, at least from a 2024 perspective, is a little suspect from a black-white perspective, but I like the fact that the word master is over Mays rather than over Rigney. I also found it a little puzzling that Rigney was quoted, at least, wanting to turn Mays into a punch and Judy hitter, as if a guy who would end up hitting 660 homers would have been more valuable if he had hit fewer homers, but for a higher batting average. Granted, in the late 50s, batting average was thought to be the best measure, perhaps the best measure of a player's offensive talents. In perhaps the most bizarre experience that Mays had with the manager, and really, I think one of the most bizarre appointments in Major League history, In 1960, the Giants got rid of Rigney, not too surprising. They brought in Tom Sheehan, who pitched in the teens, was 66 years old and had never managed. Not surprisingly, Sheehan didn't last long in San Francisco. But this is the first time where Mays, now, a decade into his career, sort of sought special treatment at the end of the season when the Giants were out of the race, wanting to tend to business. I believe it was in New Rochelle. I believe Mays lived in New Rochelle at the time, which I only mentioned as someone who grew up in Westchester County and whose family still lives there. They had a bit of a back and forth. Sheehan gave him permission the first time. Mays took it, didn't give him permission the second time, and rather than being fined, Mays decided not to leave the team. In perhaps the most controversial manager under Mays' tenure, Alvin Dark, Mays' former teammate, another former teammate from he played, another rookie manager, the third one in a row, appointed Mays as captain. The Giants returned to the World Series for the last time in Mays' career with the Giants in 1962, where they lost in 7 games to the Yankees. So Mays was captain, but we'll see more later that may have been more in title than in terms of responsibilities. Not that captains in baseball, unlike in hockey, have assigned responsibilities. There was a big controversy in 1964 when Dark gave an interview to Stan Isaacs, where he really criticized his players of color, saying they didn't take pride in their achievements. They weren't team players like the white players. Again, through the lens of 60 years later, I would hope through the lens and the time, this predates my birth by 4 years, a despicable thing to say. Putting the racism aside, and I don't mean to diminish it, from a sporting perspective, it was pretty bizarre. Mays was clearly the best player on the team, and many of his teammates of color were also clearly the best players on the team. Mays reportedly urged his teammates to forget about what Dark said and concentrate on the pennant race. They did not win the pennant in 1964. That was Dark's last season with the team. After Dark died, Mays said some nice things about Dark, whether it's because he truly believed it or you don't speak ill of the dead. I don't know. Obviously, they knew each other for many years, and Mays may have let bygones be bygones. With Herman Franks taking over in 1965 for the rest of Mays' career with the Giants, for the most part, at this point, Mays was pretty much a legend in the game already in the second half of his career. And for the most part, his managers would treat him with respect and the deference that a star player like he deserved. Mays liked how being captain under Franks meant more than being captain under Dark, that Franks solicited Mays' opinion about his teammates. And again, given Mays' tenure on the team, that's understandable. Franks was succeeded by Clyde King, another rookie manager. And King didn't initially treat Mays with respect or, held Mays up to the same standards that he might have held up other players who had assignments to carry out. That lasted for about a day. There was a lot of blowback. It was pro-Mays blowback. And King realized quickly that while he may have been the manager of the Giants, he did not have as much power on the team as Willie Mays. Charlie Fox was Mays' last manager in San Francisco and the 6th and final consecutive rookie manager that Mays had. I particularly like this outfield, which is why I pictured Mays with his teammates more. I'll do that a little bit more later. Ken Henderson, in my opinion, was a very underrated offensive player who may not have realized his potential. Bobby Bonds was really a superlative, outstanding player who I think has been, maybe not for those of you who are in the San Francisco area, but I think for baseball fans in general, has been overlooked for what an amazing player he was, given the accomplishments and notoriety of his son, Willie Mays' godson. So Mays here really took over the leadership role again, now having very specific assignments. You could certainly picture Mays directing Henderson and Bonds where to play in the outfield. Perhaps unfortunately, perhaps fortunately, depending on your perspective, Mays left the Giants and played his final 2 years in New York. The 1973 Mets are one of the first teams I have dim memories of, and I think to the extent people recall Mays's days with the Mets, it's about how he was hurt a lot in his last season, stumbling out of the batting box, not playing the last 4 games of the World Series. I think all of that's true. In 1972, Mays was actually still one of the best players on the team. In wins above replacement, he was 6th on the Mets in 72. In 73, he was 22nd and clearly done as a productive major league player. Berra and Mays would have been a dream combo had they played on the same team in the 50s or the early 60s. They would have been unbeatable. But they clashed as managers. Mays and DeRocher, in retrospect, may have been equals or almost equals in terms of prominence in the game. But that was at the beginning of Mays's career. This is now at the end of Mays's career. Berra was under a tremendous amount of pressure in New York and, decided that Mays was going to be treated just like one of the guys. And if you read stories about the Mets players, they loved Mays. They just really admired him, looked up to him, couldn't believe they were playing with him, were thrilled about it. But that attitude did not, extend to Berra. And my sense is that it was not a particularly happy end to the career of Mays and his managers. So now the rest of the presentation is not in the book or the article, but here's a chart just to sum up what I was saying, which I hope shows the racial issues that, Mays unfortunately never played under a black manager after Davis and played for 6 rookie managers between Rigney and Fox. And the picture here is, I'm sure most, if not everyone knows, Gaylord Perry, Willie McCovey, Juan Marichal, and Orlando Cepeda. All the Hall of Famers, they're all pictured here in Cooperstown. The Giants were quite a team, both quite a team with Mays and quite a team without him. Mays just missed having the opportunity to play for another black manager. His last game, as I said, was Game 3 of the 1973 World Series. And a little over a year and a half later, Frank Robinson, who debuted, several years after Mays in the 50s, became the first black manager in the American International League. One used to be able to say Major League Baseball, but now that the Negro Leagues are rightfully considered major leagues, not the first major league manager. It's interesting to think how Mays's relationships with his managers might have changed had he had the opportunity to play under another black manager. Perhaps they wouldn't have changed at all. It's impossible to say. Bill James, I'm a big Bill James fan. In his second historical abstract, the new historical abstract, figured percentages by a method slightly different than mine of how players did over the course of their career. Mays ranks quite highly on this list, behind some usual suspects in terms of New York Yankees at the top and in the middle, and maybe some less than surprising topics. There's some Giants below Mays on the list as well. The method I used in the book was to take the records of the teams with Mays and without Mays, and that's really what I focused on. This is really just a picture I threw in here because I think it's fun as a big baseball card fan. This Hank Aaron card that one might have assumed, I would have assumed that was Hank Aaron sliding into home base. My SABR colleague Jason Schwartz, who's the co-chair of the SABR Baseball Cards Research Committee, posted this photo showing that's in fact Mays sliding into home base, and they've just painted out Mays's Giants cap and put on a Milwaukee Braves cap and colored in the sleeves. There is a SABR book that is forthcoming on Hank Aaron, and I have done an article. It's not yet out. It'll be out whenever it gets out, on Hank Aaron and his managers. So you'll note the statistics that I came up with Mays were very similar to Bill James. Bill James has Mays at 546 winning percentage. I have it at 547. I'm pretty sure James did not include Piper Davis or the minor league managers. I also calculated records without Mays. So this was the managers' entire careers, professional, so major and minor, both before they managed Mays and after they managed Mays. And I did the same thing for Aaron. And this is another way of showing the experience. Mays and Aaron's played roughly the same number of games, but the managers who managed Aaron managed way more games, roughly, twice as many, 21,000, 22,000 to 11,000. So Aaron benefited from more experienced managers than Mays did. Another way of looking, and I certainly don't mean to diminish Hank Aaron or Willie Mays, two unbelievable players who had incredible careers. But in terms of at least how the managers did, the average 162 game season, the folks, if you just take the 547 winning percentage that Mays had, those teams won 89 games. So in today's baseball, at least, those would be playoff teams or near playoff teams. But they were sub 500 teams, those managers without Mays. Mays made below average managers above pennant contending managers. I was very surprised, and I don't have a particularly good explanation for it, that the Aaron numbers are so close. They only won an extra game with Aaron on the team than without the team. Obviously, baseball is a 25-man game. It's not a one-man game. So it's not like football. Maybe if you have a great quarterback, you can win almost all of your games. And if you don't, you can lose almost all of your games. But I thought the differences in the numbers between Mays and Aaron, I found compelling. So of course you can't do a presentation on Willie Mays without perhaps the greatest play in the history of baseball, a graphic of that. So I'm on the back end of the presentation here, but appreciate everyone's attention and I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Can you just not share anymore?
Yep, I will do that right now.
Mark, I got to tell you, that was fabulous.
Thank you.
Really, really, really well done. Very enjoyable. And for the rest of you guys, this is available to be downloaded, or you can purchase it from Amazon. Mark, I want to make one comment, and I have a question for you. First of all, I love how you included the managers in the Negro Leagues and the minor leagues. I thought that was great. My second question is, other than Leo DeRocha and other than Leo DeRocha and Yogi Berra, you mentioned that they were all rookie managers. And so DeRocha was, of course, his rookie manager when he came up, and Berra the last manager. Do you feel that Giant ownership felt that Mays was sort of an on-field manager, and that's why they decided to go that route? Because some of the managers were also former teammates of his.
Right. That's an interesting theory. My theory, not knowing the answer to it, is that the organization thought perhaps the team was so good it didn't need an experienced manager. And they perhaps wanted to save money. I assume rookie managers made, like they do today, less than experienced managers. My sense is no, and I never saw anything like that. I think it would have been pretty unusual. It wasn't really till the end of Mays's career that there was even talk, and it was the same near the end of Aaron's career that there was talk they might become managers. I think the notion of a black man being a manager in title or not in title, but in practice was probably too much for most people to digest in the 1950s and 60s. And one other point I meant to make and should have made is, of course, Mays's career and Aaron's career and Jackie Robinson's career and Frank Robinson's career happened, when the civil rights movement really picked up steam in the United States. And that, I'm sure, complicated the relationships, the professional and personal relationships that players had with managers and with the media.
Mark, again, thank you so much. Mars, you are first.
Well, thank you, John, for joining us. The only question I have here is, do you have any thoughts on why Mays didn't talk to Bonds, Barry Bonds, that is, about admitting to performance-enhancing drugs to better his chance of getting into the Hall of Fame?
Oh, that's beyond the scope of my presentation. I'm happy to speculate. Talk about complicated relationships. Mays was and is considers himself a giant for his life. I'm sure he didn't. Well, first of all, we don't know what he may have said to him privately. And I imagine if you say something to your godson that could be controversial, you probably say it to him privately rather than publicly. But I'm sure everything I've read about the relationship seems to be it's a very loving, mutually respectful relationship. And so I don't think it would have been something he would have taken on. And you know, given, I showed the slide of Mays and Mantle, given the suspension that they had for when they worked as greeters at the casino in Atlantic City, Mays may have thought less of the imprimatur of official Major League Baseball, not meaning as much, given what I would say the BS he went through, and which was weird at the time, and given how Major League Baseball has embraced gambling today, is really looks bizarre in retrospect.
Thank you.
Mark, by the way, before I go to Steve, that one picture you had was the first outfield I knew of, and I loved the Ken Henderson, Bobby Bonds, and Mays. Brought back great memories. Steve, you are up.
Especially the outfit we'll look at now compared to that. Just a couple of points. You might even be able to use these for future demonstration. And thanks for coming on. It really was well done. I love the baseball cards. I have a lot of them too. You know, Mays himself, certainly into the late 60s, would probably have said, I didn't need a manager. And I know he was quoted many times as saying, I didn't need a coach. For example, in 62, if Matty Alou was on first, if Mays was on first, and Matty Alou would have hit the double, Mays always said, me and Elston would have had a good time at the plate. There was no way they would have stopped him at third. The Yogi Mays thing dragged into the 73 World Series Game 7. You might be aware of that. There were two guys on the bench. One was Wayne Garrett, one was Willie Mays. Unfortunately, Yogi probably made the wrong choice bringing up Wayne Garrett. The other thing you mentioned about DeRocha, the relationship that he had with Mays, sometimes you wonder, I wonder if somebody else who might have been a rookie manager would have dealt with Mays, whether he would have snapped out of that shyness like he did with DeRocha. You know, pull up your pants. You're a big boy. Get in there. You're going to be in my outfield no matter what. And in fact, and I'll try to keep it clean, it might have been after that first home run, or certainly second or third home run, DeRocha was quoted as saying, I never saw a bleeping guy hit a bleeping ball so bleeping far in my bleeping life. And that was a motivational too. So it was good that he started with DeRocha. Thank you for your presentation. It was excellent.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your comments. And just to be clear, I'm not necessarily arguing that Mays needed a veteran manager, but as a team, I think some of the team might have benefited from a manager. And at least today, you see most teams, when they replace managers, they try and get a different type. If they have someone who's a real disciplinarian, they try and get a player manager. If they have a young manager, they try and get an old manager, just to mix things up. So it's interesting to me that the Giants didn't try and mix things up for as long as that pattern continued. But I appreciate your comments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Burbridge, you are up.
Hi, Mark, I appreciate it. You really kind of illuminated my view with respect to the managers. I didn't really quite realize all those rookie managers until I read your article and now tonight also. You want to talk about a complicated relationship, it's probably Doc and Mays. And they seemed to get along well when they were playing together, because he did play with Doc. And in 1963, Doc points him being the captain. I don't know if Doc had as much problem with the black players as with the Latino players. He didn't like the fact that they weren't speaking English, and he didn't like their music in the clubhouse. And he makes that comment to Isaacs. And Willie suddenly realizes that all Doc wanted was to have him keep peace in the clubhouse. And he didn't really want any advice or talk to him about anything. At least that's what I read. And Mays eventually goes to Stoneham and says, Horace, we got to do something about this. And Stoneham apparently tells Mays, don't worry, he's going at the end of the year. And he was really going because he's having an affair with an airline stewardess who I actually talked to, and is a very nice woman. And that Stoneham bothered more in Stoneham than the fact that there was this race. So I don't know, what do you want to comment on this relationship between Doc and Mays?
Well, first of all, I'm impressed by your research. That's really, I haven't talked to anyone in that nature like you have. I'll just read Dark's quote. I don't know what was in Dark's heart or in his mind, but the quote was, you can't get Negro and Spanish players to have the pride in their team that they get from white players. You can't make them subordinate themselves to the best interests of their team. So he may have picked on the Spanish players, which is also despicable, as opposed to the black and the Spanish players. But it was why you would think that, much less say that. But you're quite right. Mays knew Dark for 10 years before he managed the team. And I don't know how much they stayed in touch afterwards, but judging by the comments in the obituary, Mays certainly contextualized it or didn't see that, or at least publicly didn't say that he saw that as the essence of who Dark was, and was able to appreciate Dark incorporating and being supportive of Mays joining the team. There's an enormous difference, as I'm sure people know, between what Jackie Robinson went through in 1947 with many of his teammates being openly antagonistic towards him. Mays joined a team not just with Monty Irvin, but with Hank Thompson. So while it's still incredibly challenging to be a black player in 1951, it was a lot easier than it was in 1947. And that's is due in part to not only to Mays' black teammates, but I'm sure to his white teammates too.
Yeah, I think you bring up a very good point that Robinson in 47, he had very, very antagonistic teammates, but by 51, everyone was started to accept black players, so they accepted Mays for his value, except for some of the fans. But Jackie really did pave the way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mark, in case you didn't know, John also contributed to the 5 Tool Book.
Oh, excellent. Well, it's always good to meet another Sabre author. Thank you.
Bill
Yeah.
Aaron, you're in. You're up, Bill. Unmute, Bill. There you go. You had it.
There
Hey.
you go. Mark, thank you for the presentation. It's very informative. I have a question and a comment. My question is, I read somewhere, and I could be wrong, where Willie Mays felt that when Rigney was fired and Sheehan was made manager, that Stoneham made him the manager because it was just temporary, that he was thinking ahead of having a new manager for the 1961 season, which was Alvin Dark. Have you heard anything about that?
No, I'm sure that's true. But again, of all of the people in the world of baseball, why you would choose no offense to senior citizens, I'm 10 years away from becoming one myself, but a rookie senior citizen manager. And Sheehan's record was pretty decent. I mean, no, it wasn't decent. They were 4 games under 500. So never mind about that. It's just a strange pick. So sure, even temporarily, why would you pick someone? I don't know if he was a drinking buddy of Stoneham, or like they had some relationship and he's paying him a favor, or he wanted to get him more years in the pension system, or it's just this truly strange, odd pick. And I think people thought it was odd at the time, and in retrospect, it's inexplicable.
Okay. And my comment is that even though Herman Franks, when he managed the Giants, that was his first managerial job in the major leagues, he did manage in the Puerto Rican Winter League a few years. And in the 1954 Santurce team that Mays was on, they not only won the Puerto Rican championship, they won the Caribbean World Series. And up until today, that team is thought of as the best team that ever won the Caribbean World Series.
Well, I appreciate you point that out, Bill, because I did not include Winter League managing in terms of the experience or in terms of the records. So I stuck to what was on Baseball Reference, but that's
that
a
I
fair
understand.
point. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Paul, you're up.
Thank you, Mark, very much. We all know that Babe Ruth, after his long and storied career that he wanted to manage, had Willie ever expressed an idea of his own about either managing or serving as an on-field coach?
No, not really. There's a little bit of talk about it in the Sporting News, which is in addition to all the books that I read about Mays. There's a little talk of it, but not much. And my guess is Mays' experience with Barra at the end of his career, if it was something he had thought about, that probably disabused him of the notion. And I think the other way of looking at it is, had Mays stayed in San Francisco, my guess is there might have been enormous pressure to name him manager of the Giants at some point. The Giants were, as I'm sure all of you know, not exactly a powerhouse in the mid-70s. But I think with him going to New York, leaving the Giants, having a bad experience at the end of his career, managing wasn't something he wanted to do. There's not a lot of examples, certainly back then at least. Obviously, Frank Robinson was a star player who became a manager, but not a lot of Mays's contemporary star players did.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks.
Well, Howard Manis, you were up.
Hi, Mark. I have a couple of questions. Well, not questions, but more like comments. Right shortly before he died, I met Bill Rigney at a memorabilia show in New Jersey. And I asked him about how it was like to manage Willie. And he was gushing. I mean, it was just unreal. He was smiling, laughing, talking about Willie. Then I had another question which changed his mood. I asked him, what do you think of the fans in San Francisco, in 58, 59, when he was manager, 60, not really appreciating him. And that led to a further discussion of the trouble that Willie had in finding a place to live, that, racism reared its ugly head. And Rigney got so angry even talking about it. He defended Willie as though I was the one doing the criticism. He just his face turned red. He to this day, or at least until that time when he was still alive and talking to me, he still has a lot of bitterness towards the way he had a lot of bitterness towards the way that the San Francisco fans treated Willie. So it was kind of a strange conversation I had with Rigney. The first part of it was very cheerful, but then the second part, he became Willie's biggest defender, perhaps in the entire world. And I was really stunned by the transformation. But he was a nice guy. He said Willie was the greatest ball player ever. I have another comment. Not having HBO, I never saw the Willie Mays documentary. Say, hey, until ironically, I was flying to San Francisco to visit relatives a few weeks ago, and United Airlines had it on their entertainment. And I was watching it, and the part about the captain, he described pretty much that he was a strong captain. I didn't know that, there was a difference between Rigney and Dark in terms of his being a captain. But Willie was describing how he told the players where to stand in the field, certain tips about where to throw a ball, how to run the bases, batting. So he was a pretty active captain. And I imagine that was due to his relationship, from what you said, with Herman Franks. And as you probably know, Herman Franks became his financial advisor in the latter part of his career. He advised Willie on, I guess, money matters, financial matters, real estate matters. So he seemed to have the strongest relationship with Herman Franks of any manager other than DeRocha. And of course, DeRocha was strictly baseball and getting Willie adjusted, and then the greatness through 55. But Herman Franks seemed to have a bigger impact on his overall life, as a San Francisco Giant and after his retirement. I don't know if you would agree with that assessment. I remember, I met Yogi Berra, but Yogi, of course, I was managing the Mets. We really didn't talk about Willie, but there was a famous picture when Willie joined the Mets. It was right around the time of Yogi's birthday, and I don't know if you saw this picture, but there's a picture of them holding the cake, big smiles in their faces as Yogi is blowing out the candles. And a year and a half later, it totally deteriorated. So those are the situations that I've been familiar with the managers. Charlie Fox, I was away at college. I wasn't paying too much attention with that, but they did win the division title under Fox in 71. And then they lost to Pittsburgh in the playoffs. So would you say that, in your opinion, that Herman Franks really perhaps had the biggest influence on Willie as a San Francisco Giant and the latter part of his career, rather than DeRocha, who was the early part of his career?
Well, first of all, Howard, I love your hat. Go Rangers.
Yeah.
Second of
they're
all,
playing later.
Yeah, no, they're playing now, I believe. So I don't know.
Well, I'll sacrifice the first period for this.
All right. Well, that's I may have to question your priorities there, but I appreciate them. I really looked at, with the exception of Dark, because of the controversy, I didn't really look to the relationship that may have had with any of these managers after his playing days ended. So yeah, Franks is probably the one who had his biggest influence on him in you phrased the question with San Francisco, so that knocks out DeRocha. And to my mind, the DeRocha relationship of his, thank you for posting the score. I hope the Rangers will come back. DeRocher's influence of his National League managers was so, to my mind, just so formative. And, you know, I just think of what's the kid's name in Baltimore, Jackson Holiday, who started 2 for 33 with 18 strikeouts or whatever, and Baltimore sent him down. You wonder if that had been, you know, DeRocher wouldn't have sent him down. You know, if you believe history, DeRocher would have kept him there, kept him in the lineup, and he had a Hall of Fame career. Now maybe Jackson Holiday will have a Hall of Fame career too. Don't mean to diminish that, but DeRocher was just so vital. I mean, Mays, and again, I don't mean to say Mays wouldn't have become the great player he was without DeRocher, but DeRocher really eased the path both on and off the field by being so accepting. And DeRocher, a man of many flaws, one of those flaws was not racism. I think if you told DeRocher you could have put a team of green, purple, red, blue, yellow, white, black people on the field and they'd win every game, he would sign up for it right away in a way that other managers of his time would not.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Howard. Mr. Weinberg.
Mark, great presentation. What do they call that baseball card in the pre-days before Photoshop?
Oh, you mean the Aaron card that was colored in?
Yeah, that was fabulous. I got a kick out of that.
Yeah,
That's a
all
joke.
credit to my fellow Sabre member for pointing that one out. I lifted his research completely there.
I was dazzled by your pedigree. You're a Yankees fan and you got a Dodgers fan in your family. Very quickly, my late wife Helen and I had dinner the first time with Bobby Thompson. You know about Bobby Thompson, right?
So if you, I have the MLB app, so I listen to games on the radio, and they now play the Russ Hodges call. It seems like in between every inning, and a lot of the calls they play over and over, and I get sick of them. I could listen to the Russ Hodges call, and my dad's gonna watch this recording later.
They should
I could listen to that every minute of every day, and I'm not even a Giants fan.
I have it on whatever I do when I go running. In the middle of my music, I got Russ doing that call. We had dinner the first time with Bobby in 1995. I've told this story, but I'm going to really cut it short. We're walking into the banquet hall, and my dear wife Helen says to Bobby, I got to tell you, I grew up a Dodgers fan. And Bobby was gracious as anything. He looked at Helen, he said, "That's all right, dear." And then without breaking stride, he turned to me and said to Helen, "My father was a Dodgers fan. Bobby Thompson's father was a Dodgers fan." And then without breaking stride, he turns to me and he says, "Until I signed with the Giants." I saw Willie the year, I got a question. I saw my first game, July 10th, 1954. I was 8 years old. And I was wondering if you had a metric that would prove I'm really only 25 instead of 78.
I think how old you are is how old you feel. So I wouldn't quibble if you're 25.
Oh, I feel like I'm 150, but that's besides the point. I do, but I saw Willie the first time, July 10th, 1954. But I saw a game in 1967, a year before you were born. Shea Stadium, Willie was playing center field. And I saw him reposition the Giants left fielder that night was Jim Ray Hart. And he moved him into a position where Hart caught a ball hit by a Met pinch hitter named Larry Stahl. And matter of fact, the relief pitcher that night was Gaylord Perry. I don't know what Gaylord was throwing. Nobody knew what Gaylord was throwing. No, Gaylord didn't know what he was throwing. But Stahl hit a screamer, and Willie kept moving him. I watched him. My brother and I were at the game, and Willie moved him over. So sort of a question that has been asked, but a little different. In your opinion, would Willie have been a good manager, a great manager, a lousy manager, understanding that Willie didn't want to be a manager? But I saw him with my own eyes. I saw Willie move the players around. And Tom Seaver famously reported that when Willie joined the Mets, Willie would sit with Seaver and go over the hitters with him, the opposing hitters. Where do you want to pitch? Where do you want me to play? I mean, that's the mark of dare I use the word genius, as well as a great player. And by the way, we here on this group, Norm, how many are we up to? Willie is a 6-tool player, at least. I think we're up to 7. Is that 8, Renee? Oh, 7. Okay. He's a 7-tool player. But would he, in your opinion, and that was a great analysis of Willie with managers and without managers, the manager's record. What's your opinion? Would he have been a good manager, a bad manager, a great manager?
Well, first of all, Jim Ray Hart as a left fielder was a pretty mediocre third baseman, though a wonderful hitter. You know, I think the story you tell and the story about the Henderson and Bonds outfield in 1971, clearly he knew where to position people in the outfield. The relationship with Seaver that you commented on, clearly he knew how to talk to pitchers. I mean, Mays had such an amazing baseball mind and had the respect and sort of awe in the later stages of his career. So there's no reason for me to think he wouldn't have been a great manager, except, you know, I read Frank Robinson's book talking about his first year, maybe it's the first 2 years managing Cleveland. And Robinson in his book talks about all the racism he confronted, especially with umpires. So if Mays had he had wanted to do it and had gotten a fair shake, given the mind he had and the respect that those who saw him play felt, I think if he'd gone into it right after his career, I think he likely would have succeeded. If it had been 10 years later, when folks hadn't seen him play and didn't remember what a great player he was and might have rolled his eyes if he told stories about positioning Jim Ray Hart in 1985 when no one knew who Jim Ray Hart was at that point, maybe not. But he certainly had all of the tools. Maybe those are the 6th, 7th, 8th tools you were mentioning, that it's hard to imagine him not succeeding at something baseball related where he had such physical and mental gifts.
Thank you, Mark.
Harvey,
Thanks, Harvey.
before I turn it over to Howard Williams, Mark, do you feel that maybe his expectations of what players should do if he was the manager might negatively, there's talk about Ted Williams being a crappy manager because he just expected too much. And you're talking about arguably the greatest player to ever play the game.
So, the difference I guess I would posit with Williams was obviously, and I'm in greater Boston right now, but I hate the Red Sox. I have no problem saying this. Williams was an extremely talented, but extremely one-dimensional player. So Williams could teach hitting. I don't think anyone questions that. But why one would think he could teach fielding or base running or pitching, as someone who's, famously hated pitchers, is, a little harder to draw. Mays could clearly teach defense, and I see no reason why he couldn't have taught fielding and base running. And again, the relationship with Seaver and the other pitchers on the Mets teams, Mays had a much friendlier persona than Williams. So I wouldn't hold Ted Williams as the ceiling for Mays as a manager. I would hold it as a floor, with the caveat that I'm completely speculating here, of course.
Thank you. Howard, sorry I interrupted you. Go ahead. Make sure you unmute, Howard.
Trying to. Thank you. And thank you, Mark. Yeah, I just wanted to go back in my memory to the 64 season when Dark made that weird interview. And I liked Alvin Dark because we moved out here in 62. So we became Giants fans right at the right time. And